Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining my colleague Porrick Kitterick and myself to hear about this revolutionary change to hearing aid prescriptions, the NAL NL3 next generation hearing aid fitting system. So what we want to do is go through the details of NAL NL3, explain why we chose now to develop this system, what it is, because it's going to be something that I think is going to catch some people by surprise, because it's not what people are expecting in terms of just a natural progression, but really involves a lot more innovation, is going to enable audiologists to provide more audiological care through the fitting process than has ever been done before. So what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a background, give you a little bit of the reasons why we've made the decisions that we did. Then Porrick will get into the details of NL3 and talk about some of the evidence and the development and the data that we've collected that supports the benefit of this new approach to fitting. So let me just start off by saying a lot of people, I think maybe even including myself a while ago, were not aware that NAL, the National Acoustic Laboratories, has been actually working on fitting prescriptions for almost 50 years. So the first hearing aid fitting rule came out in 1976. And the first one that really, I think, got worldwide prominence was NALR, which was a prescription for linear hearing aids. And I remember back when I was an engineer at Resound in the 90s, I actually had the equations to NALR on my corkboard, on the corkboard beside my desk as I was working on developing new hearing aids. So it's it's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. In 99, NAL came out with the first nonlinear prescription because of the prominence of multi-band compression. That was becoming quite common in the hearing aid field. And then the very last update to the fitting prescription from NAL, NAL NL2, was released 14 years ago. So it's been quite a long time since NAL has figured out what to do next with fitting prescriptions. And that's what we want to talk to you about today, because we're very excited about what we're bringing to the audiological field and the hearing aid community. So first of all, you might be asking yourself, why do we want this? Because as you can see here, NL2 is very broadly used around the world. Over 70 companies have licensed it and have put them in their products. All the major hearing aid companies, the real manufacturer equipment companies, a lot of OTC companies are now using this. And the FDA is actually using NL2 as the gold standard for when they decide whether to approve OTC hearing aids for market. So why do we need an NL3 given its widespread use and obvious clear success? Well, there's a few reasons why we decided a while ago, a couple of years ago, that we needed to come up with a new prescription, that the time was right today. So why do we need this NAL NL3? Well, first of all, as I just said, NAL NL2 was developed 15 years ago, and we've learned a lot about hearing aid fittings in the past decade and a half. We've learned what works, what doesn't work in terms of patients with different kinds of audiometric configurations. Also, a lot of people don't know this, but NAL NL2 was based on a neural network or a machine learning system to create the prescription. So believe it or not, everyone who's been using NL2 has actually been using AI for the past 15 years. Now, there's been a lot of advancement in AI over the past 15 years. And so the tools that we can bring in terms of machine learning, neural networks to develop a fitting prescription are a lot more capable than what existed 15 years ago. So we believe just by applying better and newer AI systems, we can come up with a more capable and more beneficial fitting prescription for audiologists to use with their patients. We also know that there are some situations where NAL NL2 just doesn't produce a satisfactory target. So if you fit a lot of people with NL2, there's probably a patient or two where you've gone, you know what, those targets don't quite look right. And we've heard from a lot of audiologists on specific cases where they believe NAL NL2 doesn't give the best targets that they could. An obvious example here is reverse slope hearing losses. So we know where we can improve based on feedback from audiologists, also from hearing aid companies and hearing service providers. So that's another area where we can improve on NL3. Back 15 years ago, when NAL NL2 was designed, hearing aids were quite different than they are today. And the focus on benefit for patients is quite different than it was 15 years ago. So that is another reason we believe the time is right in order to come out with an improved fitting prescription. And then finally, if you look at the details, NAL, NL1, and NL2 were designed to optimize speech and quiet. So what it does is it maximizes the intelligibility of speech and quiet while preserving sort of an overall comfortable loudness for the person, normal loudness. Now, that's great because that was a big challenge for hearing aids back 15 years ago. But I think today we can all agree that understanding speech and quiet, we're doing pretty good with hearing aid technology today, and we're doing pretty good with the fitting prescriptions that we have. But I think we can also agree that our patients' lives are more complicated than listening to speech and quiet, and that the challenges that audiologists face in fitting hearing aids are often about other kinds of situations than listening to speech and quiet. So we realize there's different situations where NAL, NL2 may not have been designed appropriately, that we need to give additional consideration for these unique aspects of the rich aspect of people's lives. So these are all the reasons that made us realize that we need to come up with an improvement to NAL, NL2. So there's kind of two parts of this improvement to NL2. One is that one that we call the evolution of our fitting prescription. And this is just a natural continuation of our prescription from 50 years ago, where it was linear, then it became nonlinear, then you had NL1 and NL2. NAL, NL3, part of it, the prescription itself, will simply be a new and improved NL2 based on some of the things I've already said. So we still focus on optimizing speech and quiet, but we also have fixed some of the problems where we knew certain audiograms gave not very great targets. What you will find is some of the targets are a little bit different, in part because of our increased understanding of the needs of fitting, but also because of the improvement in AI technology that we're incorporating into our system that Porrick will talk about a little bit later on. And also we've looked at millions of audiograms and targets and real ear measures from the databases that we've had access to. And we believe that NL3 is now going to be more consistent with what audiologists actually do and help with some of the fine tuning that they used to do that they now won't have to because we've embedded that into NL3. So the evolutionary part of NL3 is simply a plug and replace NL2 with NL3. You'll use it in the exact same way. It'll just be sort of the new and improved, the next great model. So that probably doesn't surprise anyone that this is one part of NAL NL3. What I think will surprise a lot of people is what we're calling the revolutionary approach to thinking about fitting prescriptions. And that's turning this fitting prescription system into a modular system. So you don't just have that one prescription that I talked about on the previous slide, but you now have solutions that will be available for different specific use cases other than the speech and quiet scenario where NAL NL2 was designed. And these could be unique kinds of patients who have different needs than the patient that NAL NL2 was designed for. It could be situations other than speech and quiet where different targets are required because of the criteria for how you would fit properly are going to be different than your standard prescription. It could be for listening for signals that are not speech. I know from my past, fitting patients who are music aficionados and getting the right gain targets for listening to live music or stream music are often quite different than what you would set for speech. Yet we don't have those in our NAL fitting systems. Also, there's new hearing technologies that may require a different approach to how we fit those technologies, such as extended bandwidth, technologies that take into account mixed losses and so on. So recognizing that there are different scenarios where you might want something other than a prescription designed for speech and quiet, tells us that we need to provide modules as tools for the audiologists so they can select what is best for the patient in front of them and give an optimal experience regardless of what scenario that patient will be in, regardless of what unique characteristics that patient has as a unique individual in front of you, regardless of the technology that you're fitting them with. So if we think about the NAL NL3 system, fitting system now, you have that core prescription that's simply a plug and replace for NL2 that will still be your best first fit for the patient in front of you, optimized for speech and quiet. But now we will be producing modules for specific cases that allow you to use your expertise to decide if any of these are right for the patient in front of you. So what are some examples of these specific cases or modules that we might develop? Well, again, it's we've taken an understanding of what the needs of the audiologists are, and that's what we'll be doing over the future, is talking to audiologists, talking to hearing aid companies, understanding where the base prescription isn't providing the best solution and working to create modules. And so some of these modules could be, for example, in situations where we can provide a better fit than NL2. Well, noisy environments is an obvious one. If NL2 was designed for speech and quiet, what about speech and noise? Or what about if you're in a situation where you're in a noisy environment, but you're not necessarily listening to a talker? There may be other ways that you would design the prescription for them in order to maximize other aspects of hearing, such as comfort or sound quality. Music, I've already mentioned, most likely requires a different set of targets than what NL2 or now the base NL3 prescription provides, because that's really designed for speech and quiet. And we know music is a very different signal and people have different needs in terms of what they want to hear with music. Extended high frequency devices, the NL2 really doesn't give much consideration to frequencies above 6 kilohertz. But if you have hearing aids that are providing audibility up to 10 kilohertz, there is benefit to hearing at those higher frequencies. But it's not necessarily about maximizing intelligibility from a classic articulation index or speech intelligibility index perspective that drove the design of NL2. So how do you fit up to 10 kilohertz? Well, it probably takes a different design approach than what was done for NL2. And then also you have this emerging population that we've investigated quite a bit at NAL, which are people who have significant difficulty with speech and noise, but they don't have much measurable hearing loss. So if you were to try to fit them with NAL NL2, it would prescribe 0 dB gain. And you might also just think, well, they're not really a candidate for audiological care because they don't have a measurable hearing loss according to an audiogram. Yet we know from the clinics that we've talked to, something like 30% of the people who show up asking for hearing help have normal audiograms, but are there to get better hearing. So what do you do? How do you fit someone with a device if they don't necessarily need amplification from an audiometric perspective? Well, we've done a lot of research at NAL into this population, and we believe there is a solution for how you might fit them with hearing devices, but it's going to take a different approach than the traditional approach. And so you might have a different need for targets other than, the traditional NL2 or now the NAL NL3 prescription. So what we've chosen to focus on for the introduction of the NAL NL3 system are specifically the noisy environments and these patients who have normal audiograms or minimal hearing loss. And the reason we've chosen these two is we believe that by providing solutions for both of these situations will have the biggest impact on hearing healthcare and will provide the best tools for audiologists to meet the needs of many of the patients coming into their clinics today. Obviously, the number one complaint that people have is for understanding speech and noise. That seemed pretty obvious that we need to really think about, is there a better solution to targets for that situation? But also we know that audiologists are seeing these patients who don't have any measurable hearing loss but need hearing help. And so we really believe that this can grow the group of people that audiologists are able to provide hearing care to, and really address an unmet need that we're essentially ignoring right now because they don't meet the classic definition of someone with hearing loss. So this year, what we intend to release is the NL3 prescription, along with 2 specific modules, one for comfort and noise and one for people who show up who have minimal hearing loss. So why should you care about this? Why do you, if you're doing really well with NL2, why would you care that we're coming out with this? Well, I think there's a few reasons. One, ultimately, we believe that if you fit with this system, you'll end up with better patient outcomes, better satisfaction with your hearing aid fittings. And obviously, this is the #1 reason that you do what you do to provide patient benefit. We also believe that this will allow for audiologists to fit a population that isn't being fit right now, but has a need. So it's almost like providing a new tool, a new solution for a group that is sitting on the sidelines asking for help, but we don't know quite how to help them. And so we're really excited about giving audiologists the tools to provide help for this population who haven't received it to date, but really want it. And then finally, we also believe that by providing more fitting solutions beyond just a first best fit will give more tools for audiologists to use their expertise in their clinical care with their patients. So it's not just click best fit and be done with it, because to be honest, that can be done today in an OTC solution where the patient pairs their OTC hearing aid with an app and just goes best fit. We believe that audiologists provide a lot more benefit to patient satisfaction and patient benefit than just putting a hearing aid on and clicking best fit. And providing this NL3 system will give more tools for audiologists to meet the unique needs of the patient who's in front of them, be able to leverage the unique skills that audiologists bring to hearing healthcare. So that's why we're really excited about being able to bring a system to audiological care and not just a single fitting prescription. So hopefully you get the why and why we're excited about the NAL NL3 system. And now I'll hand it over to Porek, who will go into the details of the design of each of these components and talk about some of the evidence of benefit that we have collected in its design through our clinical trials. So take it away, Porek.
Thanks so much, Brent. So I have the pleasure of bringing you through some of the details now, and I will start with the prescription. So as Brent says, our NAL NL3 prescription is designed to be a drop-in replacement for NAL NL2, but we have made some significant changes under the hood to address feedback that we've received from clinicians over time. We've also looked at how can we improve our core prescription using improved technology. In particular, our approach to improving speech in quiet has always been based on the idea that we can use models of speech intelligibility to maximize intelligibility while giving gain to the end user that does not exceed that a normal hearing person would hear. So the technology can allow us to do that in an even better way. And finally, we've had over 10 years now of experience of NAL NL2 being used in clinics in both here in Australia, but also, of course, around the world as the gold standard for fitting hearing aids in adults. And we've learned a lot through that process about how to improve in specific use cases, as Brent has mentioned before. So what have we done to do this? Well, if we think about NAL NL2, it was developed at a time where there were much tighter limits on computational power in solving this challenge of maximizing intelligibility. They were able, because of that, to only use a limited number of sort of template or artificial audiograms to inform the fitting prescription, and could only use the sort of more general tools that were available at the time. But of course, technology has changed significantly in the past over 15 years now. And so I want to just sort of bring you through some of the changes that has allowed us to make. So I'm going to show you some examples here of the new technology that has underpinned some of these changes. So here's an example of a reverse slope hearing loss. And we got significant feedback that in many cases, the gain profile that NAL NL2 prescribes can be sometimes suboptimal. And a lot of the feedback that we've received is that some of the gain profiles don't really match what you would expect as a clinician to provide. So here's an example of a reverse slope hearing loss where NAL-NL2 introduces this very large amount of gain at a single frequency only, but using this newer technology that allows us to find a better optimum. You can see a more reasonable fit provided by NAL-NL3. Here we can also see a case of a reverse slope hearing loss where the general feedback we got is that NAL-NL2 is prescribing far too much low frequency gain and not enough high frequency gain. And you see that without changing the fundamentals of our prescription, but improving the technology that finds the optimal targets, you see here that that is an example of it doing just that. We got similar feedback from mixed losses, which is another key area that we've focused on to improve. And generally speaking, we've got feedback that it would generally prescribe far too much gain at low frequencies. And so here with NAL-NL2 in grey, but NAL-NL3 prescription in yellow, you see that there's a reduction in low frequency gain, again, coherent with the feedback that we get from clinicians. Now, we've done a lot to try to improve our core prescription, and one of those things is to introduce audiological intelligence, so the alternative AI, which is to say, actually getting a lot of audiologists to look at targets coming out of it to allow us to make sure that the core ingredients that make up the prescription are quality and that we're putting in good data, which ultimately gives you good targets in the clinic. And so what we've done is we've generated large numbers of targets, had audiological review of those targets, and then that allows us to identify any problematic ones, because ultimately we will always need to make sure that all the targets we're generating make sense. And then that allows us to deliver an end prescription that is far more usable in the clinic with less sharp edges or any sort of curly cases that you might come across. We've not only developed this, but we've been really busy since the start of 2025 in actually applying and testing this in the real world clinic environment. So to date, we've actually tested our new prescription across 27 clinics around Australia. We've had over 30 clinicians using it in their day-to-day caseloads, fitting over 150 clients and completing hundreds of REM sessions with both new hearing aid users and existing clients. So this is already something that's received a lot of use in the clinic, and we're constantly refining and improving it towards the release later this year. What are the sort of feedback that we're getting? Well, here's some examples. We get really positive feedback from clients, but actually from the clinicians themselves, they're saying it takes less fine tuning. They're finding that patients prefer it compared to NL2, and in particular, they're noticing some of the nice quality of life improvements we've made. But ultimately, we're not changing the core approach, but we're improving it and making it more usable in the clinic. And so far in 2025, we've had over 45 people at NAL working on this. We've fit over 500 hearing aids. We've hundreds of hours of research visits that we've been working on to try to make sure that our prescription and the modules, which I'll come and talk about in a second, are as good as they can possibly be, or that reflect our best thinking and the best data that we have. We've completed thousands of real ear measurements in our labs, but importantly, we've also looked into the real world, and we've given these new prescriptions to patients and clients who are walking around in the real world, and we've gathered over 10,000 ratings from people experiencing them and comparing them to our core prescription so that we can really understand whether our new modules are delivering additional benefit. So when we think about the NAL NL3 prescription, what does it mean to you? Well, you've already got NAL NL2 in your fitting software and your REM systems. As the hearing aid manufacturers and REM equipment manufacturers license NAL NL3, you will see that being replaced by our NAL NL3 prescription. So ultimately, what you'll see is that you will be able to continue to fit in your usual way, but you'll be able to take advantage of the new prescription simply by selecting it from the drop-down menu when it's available. So the key message is keep doing what you normally do. You shouldn't notice much of a dramatic change, except for those challenging audiograms, and you'll probably notice that it takes less fine-tuning and generally is closer to a usable real-world target from the get-go. So that's all about our core prescription. So what about our modules? What have we been doing with these new modules? As Brent said, we're coming out with the first release of NAL NL3 with 2 modules. And first I'll focus on the NL3 Comfort in Noise module. So why is there a need for this module? As Brent mentioned, NAL NL2 was based on the idea of listening in quiet. But of course, we know and you know that people accessing hearing services and wanting help with their hearing, we live in a noisy world these days. So we're not trying to optimize hearing for an environment that looks like this. Really, we're trying to optimize hearing for an environment that looks like that. And that's what we are doing with the NL3 Comfort in Noise module. To gather some initial evidence on our comfort in noise module, we took a cohort of 42 adults with a wide range of hearing losses from mild all the way up to severe, and we brought them into NAL and we got them to complete a whole range of different assessments, but importantly we sent them out into the real world so they could experience the difference between the new module compared to our core prescription. Now, the core prescription is different in some really critical ways, but fundamentally what it's trying to do is improve comfort, but we do not want to sacrifice intelligibility. So now we've always prized intelligibility in our fitting prescriptions, and so we're trying to improve comfort while maintaining that in your clients. So one of the first things we did is we brought them into the laboratory here at NAL, and we actually tested their speech perception in noise. And here I'm showing you their speech perception in noise with the NL3 prescription, which is the black bar, and the new NL3 Comfort in Noise module, which is the yellow bar. And the first thing that we were very happy to see is that there was no significant difference in the intelligibility in noise. And so that allowed us to assure ourselves that although we've made some big changes under the hood, intelligibility was preserved. But the important thing is when we sent people out into the real world to see, does this actually deliver to improve comfort? And so we use something called the Ecological Momentary Assessment app, or NEMA at NAL, which allows us to give participants a smartphone app, and in real environments, as they're listening, and importantly, as they're comparing the module to the prescription, they're able to give us direct feedback in real time. And this is what we found. What we found was that with the NL3 Comfort in Noise module, we saw people display a significant preference, both in terms of naturalness, comfort, pleasantness, quality, and an overall preference for the NL3 Comfort and Noise module compared to the NAL NL3 prescription. So again, we've preserved intelligibility when we've measured it rigorously in our laboratories, but in the real world, our patients are telling us that in a blind comparison that they really prefer the new module over the prescription for listening in noise. So what do our participants say? They say things like that they found it preferable in every sense when they listen in noisy environments, and it was able to reduce the environment not being too overwhelming while prioritizing picking up speech from their friends and family. So what does this mean for you once you get access to this new Comfort in Noise module? What it means is when you create a new program or a preset in a hearing aid for use in noisy situations, we recommend using the NL3 Comfort in Noise module. And that will allow us to deliver for you improved comfort while maintaining intelligibility. If you verify your NL3 prescription targets in your main program, then the comfort in noise targets can be applied to the noise program without the need for re-verification. So nice straightforward change, allowing you to access that when you're setting up noise programs for your patients. So now let me move on to the minimal hearing loss module. And again, if we think about why is there a need for this module, very simply, we can think about NAL NL2 as a reference case. What happens today if somebody walks in to your clinic with normal audiograms? So if we put in a normal or minimal hearing loss into NL3, then, or NAL NL2, excuse me, then this is what it prescribes. It essentially prescribes little to zero gain across the board. Why? Because it was designed to focus on intelligibility in quiet and was never designed considering the case that somebody may have difficulties that were not evident in their audiometric status. And so we have taken a step back, and as Brent said, NAL has done a lot of research, a whole series of studies in this area, really looking at how to maximize the benefits from hearing aids in this population, and we've embedded those learnings into the NL3 minimal hearing loss module. Again, we took a cohort of people from everything to completely normal hearing right up to very mild losses where NL3 gives little or no gain. And what we did was we measured speech intelligibility in the lab. So one of the key things that we want to see is that if we give people access to these prescription and give them the benefit of signal processing technology, directional microphones, that modern hearing aids can provide, we would expect to see significant benefits to listening in noise. And that's exactly what we see. So here I'm showing you the speech benefit that our participants experienced. So that's defined as how much their speech score improved when listening in noise, when they were using and listening the NL3 minimum hearing loss module compared to the NL3 prescription, so the speech in quiet prescription. And here I'm showing it for multiple different brands because it depends on the nature of the technology as well that you're giving the patient, because it's very important that what we're doing here with the minimum hearing loss module is giving them access to the signal processing and the advanced features of the hearing aid. And what you see here is that we see anywhere between 8 and 10 or even greater percentage points of benefit in a very rigorous lab-based assessment of speech and noise. So these individuals have normal audiograms but are benefiting from using hearing aids. But of course, one of the things that we don't want to do is provide so much gain that people don't find the hearing aid usable. They don't find it acceptable to use that, because these are also new hearing aid users, and you'll be well aware of the challenge of new hearing aid users and acclimatization to gain. So our approach was to try to maximize intelligibility while also providing as little gain as possible to make the hearing aids acceptable. So we also looked at acceptability, and here I'm showing you from data that we sent our participants out into the real world. We got them to complete those EMA surveys that I mentioned. They're in the real world environments. They're telling us how they're getting on. And what they find is that compared to zero gain or very, very, very little gain, basically they can't tell a difference between that and our minimal hearing loss module. So we're adding gain in the minimal hearing loss module, but we're not making things less natural, less comfortable, or affecting sound quality. So we're improving speech perception benefit in noise while actually not making the hearing aids any less acceptable to a normal hearing or a minimal hearing loss person. So that's really at the core of our philosophy, is make the hearing aids usable and beneficial to this group. And of course, now if we look in the real world as well, we also looked at clarity of speech and we looked at effort, and we compared those again to the NAL NL3 prescription, which gives, as I said, zero gain in these cases. And participants did a blind comparison between the two. They didn't know which one they were listening. And we saw an overwhelming preference in our participants that they chose the minimal hearing loss module to be giving the clearest speech and allowing them to listen with the least effort. So again, this is demonstrating that it isn't just a benefit in the laboratory, but it's a benefit that we see in everyday life. Our participants report very positive things here. They say that they're able to hear better in noisy situations with less effort. They say it sounds enhanced but still natural, and they really feel that they can actually listen in these noisy places. So what does this mean for you? Well, now, when you get your hands on NAL NL3 fitting system, you will have a validated way of fitting hearing aids to patients where their PTAs are in that normal to very mild range, so 0 to 25 dBHL. We would always recommend that you try to fit the patients with the best speech and noise technology they can afford. The reality here is that it is all about those additional features, the noise reduction, the directionality, because ultimately their needs are about speech and noise rather than just audibility. Our formula and our module helps with the audibility of the hearing aid, and then it allows them to benefit from the technology. So fit the patients with the best technology they can afford. And of course, since the audiogram in this cohort is no longer indicative of need, then I think we as a field have to look to alternative ways to determine who's likely to benefit from these devices. Now, that's something that NAL will continue to do research on, and is something that we see as very important. But we think that instruments like the Hearing Handicap Inventory or COSI 2.0 or other things that will be introduced over the coming years, we would say focus more on the person's need rather than their audiogram, because ultimately that's more informative in this group. So I've given you a whistle-stop tour through all of the details of the new NAL NL3 prescription and the new NAL NL3 modules. So what does this mean? Ultimately, it's an improved gold standard for first fit when it comes to our prescription. We are introducing these new modules, and we believe and we have evidence to show that they will produce a better patient outcome and ultimately better patient satisfaction compared to NAL NL2. We are now giving you the tools to fit people who have minimal hearing loss but have difficulty. And really importantly, there is now an evidence-based approach to how you can fit devices to these individuals. And then finally, to echo what Brent said earlier, here at NAL, we believe that this is a great opportunity for the audiologists and the hearing aid dispensers out there to use their judgment and use their skills to use these new tools that we're giving you to provide the best personalized solutions to your patients. And we look forward to improving and enhancing this fitting system over the coming years. So with that, I just want to thank you for listening. It was a pleasure on behalf of Brent and myself to bring you through what we've been working on with NAL NL3, and we look forward to you getting your hands on this and using it in your clients for those improved outcomes later this year.